BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. It is Wednesday, time for the AMA. Welcome to the show. This is the Ask Me Anything, where I respond to your questions and comments. We go through them together and have a discussion. We will begin with the comments about the Zodiac Killer, but I would also like to give a big shout out to everyone who checked out the episode, The Disappearance of Lee Cutler, and that was one that was requested by one of the listeners, so if anybody has any ideas for a future episode that they would like covered on the channel, please put your idea in the comments section, and perhaps it will end up on the Anything Goes segment on Friday, or maybe Zodiac Mondays if it's related. But to begin with some things about the Zodiac Killer, last Monday, the day before yesterday, that is, I did an episode on the Zodiac suspect, Frank Valentine, and you guys said some really good things about him. His name, of course, is Frank Dryman. Frank Valentine was one of his aliases, and the other one was Victor Houston, that he used very frequently. But there was a particular comment that was about a different Zodiac Killer suspect that stood out, and that was from Chris GP, who had something to say about Gareth Penn as both a researcher and a suspect. And this one says, Gareth Penn is neither the Zodiac or correct. A very clever clown. If you listen to that episode, the Citing In on the Zodiac Killer book discussion, I was responding to Drew Beeson's book of that title, and the middle section of that book has suspect profiles like not only Donald Lee Cheney and Arthur Lee Allen, the ones that Drew Beeson really zones in on, and Don Cheney, of course, is his prime suspect for the Zodiac Killer murders in 68 and 69, but he also compares and contrasts all of the major, more famous Zodiac suspects out there, including Ross Sullivan, Donald Lee Booyock, and I said that his suspect profile on Gareth Penn stood out to me the most because I had wanted to disagree with it. It begins by saying that Gareth Penn is a few fries short of a Happy Meal, and I disagreed with that by saying I instead had somewhat of a reversal about Gareth Penn, the author of the book Time 17, who then goes on to become a suspect himself. Yeah, for a while, I thought that Gareth Penn was just a really weird writer who had a very odd Zodiac Killer theory, but then I began to view him as somewhat of a cold, menacing, methodical, and calculating individual in his own right. In short, somebody who was trying to get a lot of media exposure, but he knew exactly how to go about it, and I don't want to use the phrase he needed a gimmick in the Zodiac Killer world of research to set himself apart from Robert Graysmith, who published a book about the Zodiac Killer in 1986, and Gareth Penn published one in 1987. But this guy is, but Chris GP has said something that's quite in the middle. Gareth Penn is neither the Zodiac or correct. A very clever clown. Okay, so Drew Beeson's profile of him more or less said that Gareth Penn was a clown, and I said, no, Gareth Penn is very clever, and perhaps this one hits the nail on the head. He's a very clever clown. As they say, I accept the rebuke. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a fair and honest assessment. If you read the book Time 17, it's really quite different than a lot of the other Zodiac Killer books out there, because it zones in so closely on the mathematical signatures, talking about binary and Morse code, as well as clues from literature and poetry, but also just that everything in the world of the Zodiac is mathematical. And of course, I've said it once and I'll say it again, someone brought this to my attention by saying that Gareth Penn didn't mean those sayings completely literally. All the stuff about how if you take the word Timex, which was found on the watch after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, And then you do Gareth Penn's whole method of converting the numbers into like binary and messing around with Morse code and so on. Actually, vice versa. That you get the number 617, which is an area code in the state of Massachusetts, where Michael O'Hare should have been from, or at the very least, he graduated from Harvard University. That's why Gareth Penn zones in on two particular numbers, 17 and 38. 38 is an old zoning code for Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the zip code 02138 is where Harvard is, and it goes on and on and on. So maybe this is the most honest way of putting it. And in short, sometimes people can think that they're in disagreement, but in reality, both sides are just saying different parts of the equation. Excuse me for using a mathematical metaphor, but yeah, Gareth Penn is a very clever clown. All right, let's go with that one. I want to do some of the excellent comments you guys were sharing about Frank Valentine. This one comes to us from Yasser Abdoun, who says, Frank Dryman Valentine has a few things going for him as a possible Zodiac suspect. He's from Vallejo, California. He was a cryptologist with the U.S. Navy. He was discharged from the Navy for mental health reasons. His widow, who is a contributor to Zodiac websites, believes it was him. There's the Montana escapee connection. Other than the very significant fact that he was locked up during the Lake Herman Road killings, he's a really interesting person of interest. I mean, that's some good points, though. Frank Valentine, also known as Frank Dryman, he used both of those aliases. He actually adopted the alias Frank Valentine, I believe, because he had to enter the Navy. He was supposed to enlist in the Marines, but he put his own twist on a particular type of legal punishment. He had the choice of going to jail or enlisting in the Marines, and he ended up enlisting in the Navy. And I cite Clem Pellet, who has written the book Dastardly about him for that stuff. But let's look at these points one by one. Okay, from California, that is a start. He is someone who spent time in Deer Lodge Prison, but he's from California, in the Navy, could have had the opportunity to learn about codes, and then his widow, who is a contributor to Zodiac sites, believes it was him. That would be something, except for the fact that there are thousands of other people, perhaps, who say that they have relatives who are the Zodiac killer, and it can't be all of them, and it can't just be who is telling the best story. I mean, lots of people have family members. My daddy was the Zodiac, or now in the next generation, my grandfather was the Zodiac killer. As we heard when we did the episode on Kenneth Lester German as a Zodiac suspect, people have also accused their uncles. They've also accused people whom they've known. We even did that one episode, Zodiac Killer, the Arthur Frank story, where someone was accusing their therapist of being the Zodiac Killer. A lot of people claim to have had first-hand connections, so that's something that could be, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with. There's the Montana escapee connection. But as we said in the episode on Frank Valentine, also known as Frank Dryman, is it of a certain fact that Brian Hartnell heard the words Deer Lodge Prison at Lake Berryessa, September 27th, 1969, the only time the Zodiac Killer went out in the hooded costume, carrying a knife, as well as a gun and pre-cut lengths of rope. And did he say, I escaped from Deer Lodge Prison, or did he say something else? I escaped from Fern Feathers Prison, or I escaped from Fernlock, Hemlock Prison, something to that effect. Are we 100% certain that Brian Hartnell heard the words Deer Lodge? Because I don't even think Brian Hartnell is certain that he heard the words Deer Lodge Prison when he was talking to the Zodiac Killer. But that is one of the few accounts of an extended conversation with the Zodiac Killer where the victim went on to survive. I mean, it's quite possible that Paul Stine talked to the Zodiac Killer quite a lot when he was murdered in the taxi cab, but I mean, that conversation will be lost to time unless some way, somehow, the Zodiac is apprehended, or maybe the Zodiac has passed away, but somebody uncovers some type of journal or some type of writing that was left behind, like a confession about this is what I said to Paul Stine. The long story short is Paul Stine is not here to give his side of the story, but Brian Hartnell survived the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and did he really hear the words Deer Lodge? If not, I think that would cut off a lot of these suspects who have the Connections to Montana: Ed Edwards, Donald Lee Booyock, and Frank Dryman Valentine. And Frank Dryman was in jail during the time of the Lake Herman Road murders, but he was paroled in January of 1969, and we had that big discussion during that episode. Is it possible that some way, somehow, he learned about the details of the Lake Herman Road shooting and then went on to incorporate it into a letter? He did go straight from Montana to California because he had a relative who worked in a furniture store that offered him a job. That's why he was paroled to the state of California. But he claimed that he had a bad relationship with his wife, his newlywed wife. So in 1971, he ran away, ran to the state of Arizona, and then, for some reason, decided to open a wedding chapel. This guy sounds like a Freudian mess. But then he adopted the name Victor Houston, and he was a fugitive at large until 2009, the longest absconding fugitive in the state of Montana's history. And when he was actually partially caught because of the work of Clem Pellet, who was the grandson of Clarence Pellet, the man whom Frank Dryman Valentine had murdered on April 4th of 1951, and that's the reason why he was in Deer Lodge Prison. And unlike Donald Lee Booyock and unlike Ed Edwards, you have somebody who's gone for 40 years and then becomes a Zodiac killer suspect. That's one thing, but he gets sent back to Deer Lodge Prison, and then Frank Dryman Valentine died in 2017 at the age of 86 due to natural causes. I will offer one more rebuttal that I did share in Monday's episode, but in case you haven't heard it yet, the difference between Frank Dryman Valentine and the Zodiac Killer is that Frank Dryman Valentine was a runner. He ran away from everything in somewhat of a cowardly manner. For example, he murdered Clarence Pellet, stole his car and money during a Montana snowstorm in 1951. That was an opportunistic crime from somebody who wanted to do something selfish because he thought there would be no consequences, and then he fled toward the Canadian border. He ran away from his parole officer in 1971 and entered the state of Arizona and never looked back. The Zodiac Killer was someone who didn't run away from the authorities. He plunged right into them. Was the Zodiac Killer a coward? 100% yes. Oh yes, most of the Zodiac crimes were very cowardly. I say most of them, I mean all of the 4 canonical crimes are quite cowardly. And I can't really comment too much on the other ones because they're unconfirmed. I don't believe any of the other incidents outside of 1968 and 69 were actually the Zodiac Killer. But in terms of cowardly, yeah, they're cowardly, but then the Zodiac wrote letters and the ciphers and made phone calls. He didn't have to do that. He gave the authorities all of these hints and leads, and unknowingly gave things that may have contained some type of fingerprints or the writer's palm, or maybe some way, somehow, DNA technology will get better, and some of the letters may have some type of other DNA form that we could use to hopefully connect this to the Zodiac Killer's identity. But the point is, even though the Zodiac snuck away in the dark a couple times, and in the daylight once, he gave the taunts. He made the phone calls. He was harassing the police. He was talking about trying to do all of these horrible things as braggadocio. Frank Dryman Valentine was someone who killed out of convenience. He was someone who ran away out of convenience, not someone who was cold, methodical, and calculating. Frank Valentine was opportunistic. He was selfish. And he was also horribly immature, because after he was apprehended, after living in Arizona under the name Victor Houston, he really didn't even show remorse for the murder of Clarence Pellet, saying that wasn't really me, that was Frank Valentine. I'm not that guy anymore, just like blaming it on somebody else, blaming it on his alias that he had been using for a while. But I would like to go back to this point about how the Zodiac Killer was a coward. Yes, he sent in these taunts, from a distance after the fact, but Lake Herman Road, December 20th, 1968, The Zodiac killer snuck up on David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, two defenseless teenagers, one 17, the other 16. They get blindsided by some guy, maybe two guys, but they get blindsided with some guy with a gun. Blue Rock Springs, Mike Mageau and Darlene Ferrin, just sitting in a car. Some guy comes up, approaches the window, shines a flashlight in, and starts firing. Again, people who aren't very capable of fighting back compared to someone who is carrying a firearm. At Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac goes out in the costume, whatever reason he had, whatever significance, whether he's trying to recreate the darkness, be the epitome of darkness and evil, or he's trying to be the Lord High Executioner from the Mikado, or it's some other work of literature that's inspired it. He's approaching people in the daylight, but wearing a mask. He ties them up so they can't fight back. And then, of course, Paul Stine, also blindsided at night. He pulls over to the taxi pulls over onto Washington and Cherry Street, and the Zodiac fires a gun to the side of his head. No chance to fight back or no chance to retaliate. The Zodiac was a coward, and he definitely killed people as a way to get himself this type of recognition that he desired. And a lot of people believe this about psychopathic or sociopathic serial killers, that for them, it's about getting other people to feel certain things. Just the idea of knowing that there's going to be suffering because of their actions fuels their excitement. Or I could be completely wrong about that, and there is another type of group murder theory, multiple killers theory. That could have happened too. But if you have a single perpetrator, then I think that would be one of the answers. So there is another thing. Because of this cowardly MO that the Zodiac has in his crimes, that whole thing of writing in the letters, I'm going to go on a kill rampage. If you don't print this in your paper, I'm going to go on a kill rampage. There's a reason why that didn't happen, to the best of our knowledge, and that's because the Zodiac wouldn't do something like that. He's not going to go on a rampage because that's going to get him captured, and he's afraid of being caught. He might act like he's hunting people for sport and he wants to taunt the authorities. He's taunting the authorities in a way that could not have come back to him in 1969. I mean, DNA technology is in its infancy. He knew that they wouldn't be able to trace the phone calls in those particular ways. So I personally believe that the Zodiac wasn't someone who was going to go on any rampage of any kind. Instead, I think that he was more about doing very, very cheap shot style crimes to get his name mentioned in the paper, or this fictional alias that he would have used for himself. Our next comment comes to us from the Cat Meow, who has one on the murder of Paul Stine, the Q&A session. And this one says, I have a really good idea for a show. Why not have anyone who feels that they are related to the Zodiac Killer? Come on, have them all come together and present one by one. Let them show and tell the evidence that they have collected, i.e. clues, coincidences, their story, whatever it may be, and bring it forward on one podcast. Maybe a long show, but just a suggestion. Peace. Well, absolutely, that could happen. I would think that instead of doing it live, where people would have to be waiting, I mean, as you said, that would probably be a very long show. I mean, how many people would be willing to do that? I'm sure if I put out enough publicity through the channels of social media, I'm sure many people would show up. So if I were to do something like that, perhaps I could collect and gather like a pre-recorded statement, or somebody could have like 20 minutes maximum, or maybe even less than that, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and they could share their story about how they believed that their family member was the Zodiac Killer. If Frank Dryman's widow wants to come on the show and, as I said, do a pre-recorded statement, give all of her evidence about why she thinks that he was the Zodiac, yeah, that could happen. So I think that that is a good idea. I don't know how beneficial it would be, because a lot of the stories that people share about how my family member was the Zodiac Killer are often based on memories that they have as a kid. Like that woman who also thought that her father was involved with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. No, she was the illegitimate daughter of John F. Kennedy. Well, and somebody whom she was related to was involved there. I don't really follow that one too closely because I didn't think there was a lot of credibility. But yeah, that could be something in the future. However, Alright, now, moving on to a comment that was left on one of the Paul Stein episodes, and I seem to have misplaced it, or maybe it's been auto-deleted. I would give you a shout-out if I had your name in front of me, but somebody said that they thought that after the murder of Paul Stein, the Zodiac Killer did indeed stop killing, and all of these other incidents, the Kathleen Johns abduction, the disappearance of Donna Lass, the murder of Joan Webster, the Sacramento freeway murders, everything after October of 1969 is not genuine Zodiac activity for one particular reason, and maybe not the only reason, but one reason that was stated, is in the 340 cipher, because there's a line that says, "Because I now have enough slaves to work for me." Not saying that I need more slaves. No, I have enough slaves to work for me. Does that not suggest that the Zodiac has completed his criminal masterpiece, and that it was all about killing 5 people within a 12-month cycle? Well, let's read the entirety of the 340 cipher, the solution that David, Sam, and Jarl have achieved, and it says, "I hope you're having lots of fun and trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. Which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing new when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid, because I know that my new life in paradise will be an easy one. In paradise, death." Now, I think it was Professor Stewart who pointed out in a previous episode that this is something we should pay attention to, with the exception of "be an easy one" and "paradise death," which may have been a mistake of the cryptographer, but with the exception of that, this is mostly incomplete sentences. "I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show." This is mostly complete sentences. So doesn't that, when anyone is ever offering you something about they've solved one of the Zodiac's clues or to anything, whether it's a new message in the letters, a new message within the ciphers, and there aren't complete sentences, then we could be very skeptical. And when I did the episode on Corey Starliper's solution to the 340 cipher, which of course has not been accepted, I did this one back in 2019. Talking about the one that reveals Arthur Lee Allen's name. At the end of it, it says, "My name is Lee Allen." But his solution was like, "Kill self, Dr. Help, kill your day." Maybe you remember that one? And I was like, the first half of this is just gibberish. There's even that word, Aeour, A-E-I-O-U-R. It's just like all the vowels except Y, which is only sometime a vowel, but then there's an R at the end. The Zodiac is obviously writing in very complete sentences. But I'd like to go back to this point about how, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, does that mean that the Zodiac Killer ceased activity in terms of actually committing murders? Of course, letters could have been written in after the Paul Stein murder, this 340 cipher that I'm talking about, for instance, but murders committed after 1969 are all not genuine. That's all somebody else, no matter what way you spin it. You guys may not like this. Actually, I know for a fact some of you will absolutely hate what I'm about to say. Others might think there's something to it. But the solution to the 340 cipher helps the Zodiac hoax theory. And I say this because it shows that it was composed after the Zodiac had appeared, well, after that person pretending to be the Zodiac appeared on the TV show, meaning that this wasn't something that had been designed from the beginning. I thought the entire time I had been looking into this, that if the Zodiac 340 actually had a message in it, this person would have planned it from the beginning. All right, I'm going to mail this 408 cipher on this date, and I'm going to mail the 340 on this date. No, this had to have been written after that person appeared on the Jim Dunbar show, and I still think that whoever composed this was expecting that people would solve it sooner. Maybe not in a weekend or something like that, but 6 months, 1 year, maybe 2 years. Definitely not 52 years later, because it's a very contemporary reference. But this goes to show that a lot of the things about the criminal masterpiece, well, maybe it's not functioning that way. After the 340 was solved, Thomas Henry Horn was on his show, the Stones Unturned podcast. He's the author of The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, The Great Zodiac Killer Hoax, the guy who promotes the idea that there was a letter writer, and the letter writer was taking credit for murders that he did not commit, and his name was Hal Snook. That's Thomas Horn's theory. I don't endorse that, I just talk about it. And he was saying that he was right, that his theory has to be right, not for this reason that I just said. He said that what Richard Grinnell called a giggling diatribe about how it didn't disprove the hoax theory. It didn't say this is my identity, here's where I buried Paul Stein's keys and wallet. Instead, it just says this stuff here. I hope you're having lots of fun and trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber. This is something that, well, it shows that it is somebody who is just messing around, who is just writing a silly little message, because I get asked this question a lot. Why do you think that the Zodiac Killer didn't put this message in a letter? This is just the same crap that you get in the other Zodiac Killer letters, except, I mean, it's actually worse. The first Zodiac letter is all about, I will state some facts that only I and the police know, as well as other letters contain pieces of Paul Stein's shirt, trying to prove that he committed these crimes. This is something that is just rather silly, but it couldn't have been written prior to that person's appearance on the Jim Dunbar show. Is that just somebody messing around? Is that showing that this is just some guy writing letters and composing ciphers, taking credit for crimes that he didn't commit, and it's all just happening in the moment, and it's not a deep personal masterpiece that is filled with personal clues. It's just somebody who is goofing off, more or less. I absolutely cannot say yes or no. I think about it from time to time, and it's good to weigh the different possibilities. The other side would be, this person knew that he was going to mail a cryptogram, but the message wasn't pre-chosen. Composing a 340-character cipher, that was planned. What was going to be in it didn't really matter too much, because I would expect that the Zodiac Killer was pretty smart, and he would have known that you're going to solve the 408 very quickly. And there was, of course, Zodiac Killer Identified, which says that Donald Gene Hardin was the Zodiac Killer. Or, well, I don't think Don Hardin was the Zodiac, not at all. Or there could be the angle that he expected that this one was going to be more complicated, and it was just about having a complicated solution to the cipher, having a complicated way of confusing people. I'm sure that if the Zodiac is dead, he was dancing in his grave, thinking about, hey, look at these people, 52 years to crack my criminal masterpiece. Or maybe the Zodiac Killer is still alive and completely incapacitated, one or the other. But that is just something that I wanted to share there. And moving on to our next comment, which is also about Frank Dryman, also known as Frank Valentine. This one comes to us from Classic Chevy Cat, who says, very good info on Frank Ned. I don't believe he was the Zodiac simply because I'm becoming more convinced that the killer at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs were the same. Bought Tom Voigt's book, reading the police reports. Boy, do I have questions. Let me be the first to admit that I am not familiar with police procedures. When the police arrived at Lake Herman Road, did they search around in the grassy hills looking for a killer or killers? I did not see any in the report that the officers wrote. Maybe they just do it and don't write into it. That would be the first thing to do, I'd think, because someone could be hiding. Maybe someone can comment on this. Well, of course, I'm not 100% sure if they were searching the grassy areas for killers. I can share with you that countless people have theorized about how the Lake Herman Road murders were committed, the first confirmed Zodiac incident. You'll find all kinds of alternative theories. I mean, firstly, that the shooter exited the passenger side door that was facing those grassy areas and then walked around, or maybe shot over the roof of the car into David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen's Rambler, wasn't it? Or someone has also said in the comment section they thought that the killer arrived on foot, maybe hitchhiking, or not even hitchhiking, but just walking along the side of the road and they have a car stashed somewhere, or maybe they came out of the grass, came out of the woods, and they arrived on foot. That's another thing. But there's also the two shooters possibility. There simply aren't good witnesses for the Lake Herman Road murders. As far as the Zodiac killer committing both the Lake Herman Road shooting and the Blue Rock Springs shooting, I said very clearly in the episode how many people did the Zodiac killer murder, which is like not a suspect ratings, but an unconfirmed crime ratings, like rating the unconfirmed incidents on a scale of 1 to 10. It was one that was requested by one of the listeners. I gave Lake Herman Road 10 out of 10, Blue Rock Springs 10 out of 10. All of the canonical crimes. I am still forced to admit that that was the Zodiac killer. And I do believe that Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs were, of course, committed by the Zodiac, until I can see something otherwise, until I can be proven in a different direction. So that would definitely be very difficult for me to accept Frank Dryman Valentine as the Zodiac killer suspect who was incarcerated in Montana at the time of the Lake Herman Road murders. But I did say that Lake Herman Road has a strong possibility of being a drug-related or gang-related crime, but I still am forced to admit that it appears to be genuine Zodiac activity. Alright, well, thank you to everybody who's listened to part 1 of this, and please stay tuned. We will be right back after this quick message, so see you soon.
You are listening to Black Box Online Radio.
This show is brought to you by TeeSpring. Feel free to check out the merchandise. Almost all sizes and colors are listed.
Black Box Online Radio. And remember YouTube Premium. You can download the show, take it on the go, anywhere and anyhow.
Please like and subscribe. Grazie mille.
Okay, and we are back. I would like to devote this segment to some comments that came in on the disappearance of Andrew Gosden from 2007, and just to provide the absolute smallest, most basic Wikipedia-style introduction. Andrew Gosden disappeared from central London on the 14th of September 2007 when he was 14 years old. On that day, Gosden left his home in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, withdrew £200 from his bank account and bought a one-way ticket to London from Doncaster Station. He was last seen on a CCTV camera leaving King's Cross Station. And this is a case that maybe you've heard of before. It was mentioned on a lot of those countdown sites, especially the ones that were talking about mysterious things that were picked up by surveillance cameras. And not to mention that, because he was on the train, there are so many witnesses of Andrew Gosden prior to his disappearance, and people even speculate to this day, is there a reflection in the glass of someone who could have been waiting for him? And you hear it from that little introduction that he purchased a one-way ticket, and my memory's a little hazy, but I think it was only 50 pence for the round-trip ticket, like 50 pence more to go from a one-way ticket to a round-trip ticket, and he refused it, took all the money out of his savings account, and when he was on the train, he played his PlayStation Portable for the duration of the journey, so said witnesses. However, he did not bring the charger for the PSP, so that's also something that is rather bizarre. And I think that this is another example of a case that has really been influenced by the media, and I mean that in the most literal sense, because there's this electronic media of Andrew Gosden being seen on the CCTV footage that can be shared on YouTube, and people can discuss it, so they can, and I think anyone can make their own interpretations of that, and it's rather widely discussed. But right now, I would like to give a shout out to Robert Flynn, who has sent me a series of comments about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden from 2007. I'll put your mind at ease. I've spotted him on the internet now. He's fine. If I said he still had a phone, that changes your equation. I mean, let's look at the first part of the comment. The thing about the phone I thought was a little bit bizarre. The first part of the comment, he says that he has found Andrew Gosden, and I replied by saying, "Hi, you found Andrew Gosden? Anything you'd like to share?" And he says, this is Robert Flynn's comment, Thanks for the note here. I can't be 100% sure. There's a lot of hoaxing online. I just saw your podcast on May 12th of 2021, and you want to know. Yes, absolutely. I would like to know. This was a very, very large mystery that was many people were pulled into, but Andrew's parents kept looking for him. There are numerous posters going around the city looking for Andrew Gosden. They even put on benefits and a concert, all kinds of ways that his family was really trying to get him to reach out. And if he is indeed still alive, then they would be the ones who should really take note of this information. Robert Flynn says, I did make a report to missing.com, and they said they will look into it. I don't want to cause issues. I mean, if someone is an adult now, 2007, we're going on 14 years, is it now? That is, he is well into his adulthood, and then people are allowed to move on in life. I mean, although he was a minor when he disappeared. I got mad over the current podcast and decided to find him. If possible, I can sense some of these things. I found a 29-year-old as of now. He works in London, and he is known as, I'm not even going to say this, blank. He has a new name, but he uses Andrew and Andy, spelled with two Y's, A-N-D-Y-Y, Andy. The age is from this person's club info for gamers. His other name is for business and for programming. I was searching these parameters. I took camera shots, any pics and info on him. The missing.com group has not requested more. It looks like him, that's all. I hope it's right, but one can never say. By the way, and this is actually some unrelated stuff here in this comment, but my response to Robert Flynn is one that I'm sure you would be thinking about. Hi, Robert. What makes you think that it's him? I mean, you don't have to share all your findings, but did he have the double ear ridge? If you've ever seen a missing persons poster for Andrew Gosden, then you'll probably have seen something about how Andrew Gosden is easily recognizable because he has a double ridge in his ear, whereas most people only have one. And Robert Flynn says, I'm happy to discuss the pros and cons. Everyone will be skeptical and positive. He keeps his hair long on the sides and has a minimal goatee, like facial hair, but not excessive. Can't see his ears. Here's why it may not be a hoax. I found it after a lot of searching. His game registration page, a one-page document with a pic and a little bio, and it said that he was 29. He might be 22 or 23 in the pictures. It has a registration number, so it's hard to hoax that number. Well, why would it be hard to hoax that number? I'm really not so sure why that would be something difficult, especially if you're going to be living under a different identity for 14 years. Wouldn't you be able to fake some sort of registration in some way? It's 2 small pixels below his 2 gamer friends, so that can all be checked. I believe that his ID is listed as, I'm not even going to say that, or similar, which came up in one podcaster's remarks. It had to be a real document. It still could be a hoax, but if Andy did it, it means he's alive. Oh, well, yes, I mean, if it is the real Andrew Gosden who is making these posts, and the long story short is, it sounds like Robert Flynn has found someone whom resembles Andrew Gosden on this gaming forum, and it seems like he has some very similar info, very similar biometrics, similar age, as well as the facial features, and he has some numbers and numerical info that also seems to match up. But of course I wasn't completely sold based on just hearing some comments like that, so I said, hi, can you email me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com? And does this mean that you think he was a pure runaway? Because many people believe that Andrew Gosden was groomed on the internet by somebody that some way, somehow, maybe he had a secret email account, or just some way of getting in touch with somebody who lured him to that King's Cross station. And when he exited, that he was meeting somebody had been waiting for him, he got out, and then that person did something to him to end his life. or at the very least put him in a situation where his life would have ended. He met some sort of foul play, either murder or some accidental death that was the result of foul play, someone trying to escape and the situation gets worse and so on. My absolute first instinct about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden was that he had committed suicide, and I was basing that on the fact that the PlayStation Portable was something that was very important to him. I mean, even what Robert is saying, Andrew Gosden was known to be very much involved with video games. However, the PSP was very important to him, right? But he didn't bring the charger, so I thought, this is some guy who didn't want to return home. He's emptied his savings account. It's not someone who is running away to start a new life because, well, he would bring his stuff with him. No, this was someone who wanted to go to a place where he could commit suicide and do it in an uninterrupted way. That was back in 2017 when I would run my mouth on the internet like nobody's business. Nowadays, I'm fully capable of admitting I don't really know what happened, and it's definitely sometimes even insensitive to make those type of specific predictions. Maybe the psychics can get away with that stuff, but I can't even stand by any of those comments I made about him before. But to interpret the evidence, there really doesn't seem to be any solid record that he was groomed online. So, I mean, we talked about murder, accidental death, and suicide. The fourth one is what Robert is saying in all of these comments. That is just a simple case of a runaway, someone who ran away, changed his identity as a teenager, and was actually successful. Robert has one response here. Okay, I might contact you at your email, but I will not reveal his current name, and even if he did, I wouldn't put that out online. I'm much more curious about the way that Robert has obtained these conclusions. I'll give the missing.org a bit more time to ask for my details. I think there may still be a reward. For you, question I can say, I personally ran away from my family at age 17, a bit older. I never looked back. So for smart people, it can be done. 25 years later, my sister located me in Utah, in the USA, so I know it's possible. His parents knew more than disclosed, I am sure. The why. It's all about relationships. And he would want his own, and he was too young at age 14 to be on his own by laws in England. So he knew this was his only option. I can't speculate beyond that. If missing persons ignored my filing case, then I could send you more info and see what you think. Okay, Robert. And absolutely, Robert Flynn has an open invitation to send me absolutely anything on the disappearance of Andrew Gosden. But based on this here, I can't make any type of determination. Some guy has found someone on a gaming platform that resembles Andrew Gosden, that all of the specifics seem to line up, and Robert also has some first-hand experience on what it's like to be a runaway. I mean, age 14, you gotta think about that. The runaway angle would be very risky. There's going to be at least a couple years until adulthood and some type of legal status, so he certainly wouldn't be going through all of the normal methods of adult living, like getting a job and renting a flat, but he most likely, and it's not entirely impossible, but it's most likely, if he is alive, then he would have had somebody providing for him, and it's not only because of the age, absolutely not, because people can lie about their age. One of the reasons why Andrew Gosden's father believed that he didn't go to King's Cross Station and then walk into the city to find a place to commit suicide was because he said, Andrew was very forgetful. If he had to pack a suitcase for an overnight trip, he wouldn't even remember his toothbrush. He was just forgetful, and he wasn't good with those things. So they really can't make too many interpretations about the leaving items behind. I think the bigger clues would be not buying a round-trip ticket, and the second one would be emptying out his savings account. That does suggest that he could have genuinely been a runaway, and maybe he did have somebody who was going to help him in this, but if I didn't hear Robert's comment right there, that Robert's actually been through this himself, running away at age 17, 25 years later, his sister found him. If I didn't read that there, then I would just probably say it's horribly unlikely that something like that actually happened. But there you have it. Robert Flynn says he's a first-hand example of how it is possible people can run away, start a new life, shed their identity, and then they move on. Well, what do you think about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden? Do you think the clues of forgetting his PSP charger, not buying a round-trip ticket, even though it's only 50 cents more or whatever, as well as emptying his bank account, are suggestive of any particular outcome? And do you have any response that you would like to say about Robert's comments there? Please put your ideas in the comment section below. I would love to read any of them. Okay, that's all for me, and I will go on to some other subjects right after the break here. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a TeeSpring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello everybody, and we are back. Moving on with the AMA, I have a comment here that comes to us from Pedro Fernandez, who says, "Often men and women try to escape marriages by assuming new lives under new names. You cannot imagine this being prevalent in the days of the internet and debit cards, but in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, getting a new identity wasn't all that difficult." And of course this is related to the material that was shared earlier about Frank Dryman Valentine. Those are two of his aliases. He even enlisted in the Navy under the name Frank Valentine. That's actually how he was apprehended in the early part of the new millennium, because he was getting his veterans benefits, his naval military benefits, under the name Frank Valentine, and that's how they caught him, not under the name Victor Houston that he was using at the time. But I just wanted to read off this comment because the YouTube algorithm is getting pretty good. I had mentioned the stuff about changing names and Frank Valentine leaving his wife and such, and then all of a sudden they recommended a video to me from The Simpsons that was just Homer Simpson going around looking for Marge Simpson, and he's saying, "Marge, did you change your name to Kelly? Kelly, Kelly, where's Kelly?" I just wanted to share that because the YouTube algorithm is getting more intense. But speaking of the way that YouTube functions, giving a shout out to Walter Sobchak, who has written in another comment on the episode about Frank Valentine. "Old boy should have swung from the gallows." Frank Valentine was sentenced to death twice. At the third trial, he was given life in prison, which he of course didn't serve the entirety of the sentence. He was paroled after 13 years of a life sentence, plus the time that had been going on for the trials. And then he was sent back in 2010, served the remainder of his life in behind bars, passing away in 2017. But old boy should have swung from the gallows. The reason why I wanted to read off this one was because Walter has written in under a different name saying, "So I typed in this comment, and I get banned for 9 hours for saying, 'Old boy should have swung from the gallows,' and that somehow violated YouTube policy. I get banned every single day for something. It's getting old real quick." By the way, this is Walter. Great thought-provoking episode. the YouTube algorithm can really recommend things that you're looking for, maybe even better than the stuff that you would think of. But also, there's a really dark and downside to the way that YouTube functions, banning somebody for that. And as far as this goes, I'm going to make a very strong pivot from some of this lighthearted stuff or having a laugh at the expense of the YouTube censors, but to take a very dramatic turn about the death penalty. Overall, I am mostly opposed to the death penalty, but hearing these things about how Frank Valentine was sentenced to hang twice, I'm really. A lot of my anti death penalty stances are really challenged when you're dealing with some guy like him because he just showed so little remorse for his actions, even coming up with a story about how it wasn't him that committed the crimes, it was Frank Valentine, he's now Victor Houston. And another thing that Clem Pellet, the grandson of the victim, shared is Frank Valentine had trouble recalling the name of the man that he murdered, Clarence Pellet, who left behind 6 children and 16 grandchildren. So, just the amount of indifference that he showed toward the victim, especially that part that I said on Monday where he fired 7 shots at Clarence Pellet, 6 of them penetrated his body and killed him, and he actually bled out into the snow during a Montana blizzard. But then Frank Valentine took the barrel of the gun and just pressed it against his hands and his fingertips because he wanted to feel the warmth, and he's just thinking, yeah, it's cold outside, I need to warm up. And then he stole Clarence Pellet's car. This all occurred back in 1951. The amount of disregard for human life that was expressed and the lack of remorse by Frank Dryman Valentine just made me think, would the death penalty be something acceptable? But what do you think about the death penalty? Overall, I'm mostly opposed to it because of, well, it's something that was actually shared by some politician guy once when he said, in the state of Rhode Island in the 1850s, a man was wrongfully executed. And then the state of Rhode Island decided, all right, one is too many. This should never happen again. Therefore, they banned the death penalty. But a better example of someone who tested my anti-death penalty stances would be Lamarcus Davidson and the Knoxville Nightmare. I have 2 episodes about that. One is even called The Execution of Lamarcus Davidson, which is a very general episode, and I used to get weekly hate mail for putting that one out there, just for taking some fairly strong stances. But I would like to hear from you. What is your response to the death penalty? Do you think we should have a death penalty in America? Or if you're from a different country, you can also weigh in on that one. I'm curious what you would have to say. Moving on to the next one. This one comes to us from Albert Forel, who left one on the disappearance of Lee Cutler. It says, Ned, why are you allergic to donations? Are you a secret Dogecoin billionaire? I don't know how to pronounce that. Dogecoin. I can get the coin part right. Is it Dogecoin, Dogecoin? It must be Dogecoin, right? Why am I allergic to donations? No, I don't really accept any form of contributions to do this show. If there's anything that anyone would want to do, you can buy a t-shirt, of course, but the best way that you can help out Black Box Online Radio is simply by listening. And I don't want it to be about the money because this wasn't started as a way to make money. Back in 2017, I just thought it would be something nice to just do a daily YouTube segment. Like all of those people who do a personal blog or vlog, just sharing whatever it is that they're going through in life. And I don't mean going through emotionally, whatever you're reading up on, and or the movie that you watched, the documentary. And for me, it ended up being the true crime cases that I was following. I had something to say about them. It was just my daily YouTube segment with just a black box on the screen, no images, no graphics. It was Black Box Online Radio, and I felt so guilty for putting up images because I'm like, it's not really Black Box Online Radio anymore. Maybe it should be Black and Bubbles Radio, or how about Black and Snowflake Radio? Ugh, can't believe some of that stuff that used to go out on this channel. But I do appreciate that all of you were listening to it. I did like the sparks, though. The sparks were nice. Anyway, it doesn't, I don't, I don't need donations. I just, am glad to talk to you guys and to have anyone, listen to the show. If you like what you hear, you can hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends and family, anyone who might find the true crime world interesting, or any of the things like conspiracy theories, psychology, any of those subjects as well. Obviously, I do not know what this Dogecoin is, but I do own some cryptocurrency, of course, being Bitcoin. If you go on PayPal, they have this whole kind of crypto marketplace, and I got a little bit addicted to that for a while. They don't have this Dogecoin, but they have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin. And I was messing around with that a lot because I'm a little bit impulsive. The way that investing works is you put a little bit of money into something, and then you're like, hey, this is going really well. So then you want to put more in, and then it goes better, and you're like, holy crap, I'm making hundreds of dollars a day, and I'm not really doing that much, or I'm actually doing almost zero work. So then you put in more and more, and then wait for it. It goes down, whatever it is, whether it's a marketplace like the stock market or something like cryptocurrency, it goes down, and then you're just like, holy crap, I did something stupid. The mistakes of the ordinary armchair investor. We have armchair detectives, now we have armchair investors. This comment came in to the DMs, actually. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram. You can also write me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com and the Facebook page, which is posted in the description box here. I've never been asked this question before. Are you half black? No, that was an easy one. I am not half black. Okay, moving on to the next one. On the Anything Goes segment last week, I did an episode called The Disappearance of Lee Cutler, and this one is from Steph at Studio Steph, who says, I think he took pills and dove into the water and he's tangled down below the roots. Happens a lot. Lee Cutler disappeared in 2007 after leaving somewhat of a makeshift campsite in Wisconsin. He was from Illinois, yes, but he disappeared in Wisconsin, about 200 miles from his home, and his clothes, wallet, ID were all found in the water, but there was also a copy of the book Into the Wild that was found in the backseat of his car, which is the story of Chris McCandless, who changes his name and disappears into the Alaskan wilderness. They made a movie about it starring Emile Hirsch and Vince Vaughn. So I think the only thing that would go against the suicide theory is that there was that copy of Into the Wild, or maybe he had somebody pick him up who provided him a new set of clothes and then he disappeared to start a new life. Well, there could be something to that as well, but I think that I really have to lean toward what Studio Steph said about this. Seems like a very likely case of a suicide. Someone who was experiencing emotional troubles, someone who felt that no one was listening to him, leaving weird and confusing notes saying, sorry, I'm a coward, but now I'll get to sleep, my head is too big for my body. Things like that, that also suggested it could be suicidal behavior. The divers did go into the water near this campsite in Wisconsin, and they were unable to recover his remains. So maybe Studio Steph is completely correct by saying that he could have been in a place where the divers wouldn't have been able to find him immediately. The water could have moved him in some way, excuse me. It's entirely possible. The alternative theories out there are things that should not be discredited, as I said, Runaway, or, well, both of those instances would be running away and starting a new life, but one would be more about living in the wilderness, and another one would be about living under a new identity in civilization. And Super Strike 9 has a comment on that same episode who says, in my opinion, this case looks more like a suicide than Maura Murray or Brandon Lawson's cases. I agree 100%. The idea of a suicide in the disappearance of Maura Murray is very, very weak. I did do the episode once called The All Is One Theory, which would mean that if there was a suicide, it perhaps may not have been planned, and I don't think that anyone who closely follows the disappearance of Maura Murray, who disappeared February 9th, 2004 after crashing her car into the snow in Haverhill, New Hampshire, actually committed suicide. Maura Murray most likely either met some type of accidental death in the woods, or perhaps she was picked up by someone and then driven to a location and met some form of foul play. Now, I've talked about this just a little bit. I don't think I have an exact episode on this, but with the disappearance of Maura Murray, it's possible that she was led into somebody's car and that person was a woman. Like, she had her car either stuck in the snowbank or on the side of the road. I mean, all of the theories have been challenged, and more or less, someone says that they've debunked it. They're saying the car didn't actually crash, the car wasn't actually stuck in the snow. If she had only just pulled the key out and put it back in, she could have started the car up because her father, Fred Murray, was able to start the car. Whatever theory that is, I just want to be clear about that. A lot of people do not accept the mainstream narrative. But then, she's trying to walk away from the car because she wants to walk to the nearest town. She's thinking, I'm going to solve this problem on my own. But then, somebody comes along and says that she wants to give Maura a ride. A woman. Maura Murray met a bus driver who drove by and opened the door of his bus and says, hey, do you need help? Do you need me to call somebody? And she says no, because she's already called AAA. His name was Butch Atwood. He was the bus driver, and he knew that Maura wasn't telling the truth because they didn't have cell service in the area. This is 2004. Very poor cell service. Butch Atwood drives back home, and the rest is history. Now, he was the last person to have seen her alive, but the search dogs lost Maura Murray's scent so close to the crash site that does that not suggest that she got into somebody's car? And this is really also difficult to pinpoint, but it's possible that the search dogs lost her scent in the middle of the road. Now, if she refused help from a man, who might she accept help from? A woman. And then the woman drove her somewhere, and that woman's boyfriend, some other incident happened that led to some horrible tragedy where Maura Murray lost her life, and I mean, she could be anywhere across New England at that point. But the disappearance of Brandon Lawson occurred in 2013, and there's a very, very famous 911 call that happened after Brandon Lawson's truck allegedly ran out of gas driving from San Angelo, Texas, heading toward Abilene, Texas, and that is also something that more or less suggests there was some type of accidental death or foul play that took place. I don't think suicide would have been a leading cause in the disappearance of Brandon Lawson, but good observation from Super Strike 9. Here's another one from Albert Forel, who left one on the episode The Flat Earth Theory, and this says, started investigating Zodiac, and now the Earth is flat. I actually have several episodes on the Flat Earth Theory. They were some of the first ones that I ever put up those pink bubbles on. This must have been back in 2018, the one that Albert Forel has responded to, because I simply just responded to it. I mean, I think at the time, the Flat Earth Theory was very popular, and I don't know if it's as popular now. There were also certain celebrities that were promoting the Flat Earth Theory. Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, Tila Tequila, who has since changed her name to Tornado something, but she had a reality show in the early part of the new millennium, A Shot at Love, with Tila Tequila. She was saying the earth was flat. Geno Smith, the NFL quarterback, maybe some other people who were just trying to get some attention and notoriety. But what was that guy's name? Is it Ryan Higa or something? A YouTuber who I guess is still famous. I never followed him closely. But he said that those gas giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn are flat because they're made of gas, and it's all flatulence. I was like, wow, that's just too brilliant for its own good. But yeah, I have a couple episodes on the Flat Earth Theory, and one person challenged me on that by saying, your limited research is amusing. And my response was quite simple. Limited research? I did zero research. The Earth is not flat. But I know this is silly, but the absolute most frustrating thing about looking into the Flat Earth Theory is so many people try to challenge the concept saying, the Earth isn't flat. It's round. But The problem is, the flat Earth people think that the Earth is round too. It's round the way that a CD-ROM is round, or that a pie pan is round, or that a record is round. I mean, something can be round and flat at the same time. So when you read through the stuff, they're like, no, the Earth isn't flat, it's round. All of those arguments are just moot. It's that's just something that I encountered. But I did also learn something recently. Back in the days of cassettes, some people will remember these. Even before CDs, you had a cassette player, and it had an A side and a B side. So naturally, the next thing in music was the CD. First there was A, then there was B, then there was CD. Oh my goodness. And then we jumped all the way to the iPod. It's a weird world that we live in. But I would invite anybody to go back and listen to some of those old Flat Earth Theory episodes. There was one that I did that was a direct response to the Jubilee channel. Oh, I don't even know what the what is that show called? Middle Ground. And I just responded to their questions about the Flat Earth debate. It might be kind of hard to get into the episode without the full context of the video or without watching that video first, but to me that was the most entertaining one on that topic that I've done here on this channel. Our next question comes to us from AJ Lon, who says, do you think we'll see high-tech serial killers like Ted Kaczynski, but with drone bombs, high-tech murderers? The short answer is yes, and the second answer is, AJ Lon, please do not give people ideas. I mean, obviously we know that people can use drones to murder someone. That's why they were famous. They were military drones that were more popular. And I don't know if you guys remember this. It was something that was very big on the internet at the time, but drones were almost exclusively related to the military. Like, people would talk about drone strikes, but at a certain time, Amazon was talking about using drones to deliver packages. And there were all of these things like political commentators and newscasters that were making fun of that because they didn't really quite comprehend the concept of what a drone was. I didn't even really think twice about it either. I mean, I didn't even completely process it, but when I was on Yahoo News once, something that I don't ever do anymore, but I went through the just the comics section that they had there, and they had all of these political cartoonists who were making fun of Amazon for delivering packages with drones, and they were showing military drones that were going to be shooting people and so on. This is an idea that people have talked about, but no, I don't think Jeff Bezos is going to kill anyone, being clear about that. But it was just really quite odd that people didn't really quite grasp that the drone was just that multi-propeller device that could move things from point A to point B. Believe it or not, I think that the flying car is something that people have talked about so much, but before the flying car, we're most likely going to have the drone that can move a person from place to place, which is quite similar to what a flying car would be, except most people probably expected that a flying car was going to be like gas-powered or oil-powered, maybe solar. I don't think they quite would have expected that it would be something similar to a drone that could move a person from point A to point B, but oh my gosh, you get into a car accident, that's bad. Could you imagine if, like, your drone runs out of power and you're flying at like 1,000 feet in the air or something like that? Crazy. EJ Londo did ask another question on that same episode when he says, how do you call it when you make somebody kill someone else indirectly without knowing you exist? I think that is psychological manipulation. That could also go into certain aspects of coercion. It would really depend on the context of how you did this. Was the person being threatened? Was this person in the fear of their life? Or this is definitely psychological manipulation, no matter what you call it. But orchestration, that could be another word. Or what is that a word where, like, when somebody takes control, like in kind of seizing power? Well, the point is that it's a command of some way. But yeah, other people like duped in deception. All of those things can be involved. Someone can be a dupe, or they think that this can happen sometimes with military experiments and the CIA and brainwashing, and that people get deceived into killing somebody. In short, they become the programmed killbot, and that stuff's mostly the fodder for conspiracy theories, but there's some things out there. The government has definitely experimented with mind control. We know all about MK Ultra. We know about other things that are like Project Monarch and so on. Okay, it happened. They've tried to do things. And then you have other stuff like Donald Ewan Cameron in the sleep room, other types of brainwashing experiments, which aren't so much about using the brain for psychic powers, but instead, the stuff that the sleep room and Donald Ewan Cameron is about is more just pumping people full of LSD to try and see how they respond to it. And this all started because he was trying to actually make a difference in the world of psychiatry, but he let his ego get the better of him, or his ambition became more important than the well-being of the patients. And there's also some other things about listening to audio recordings on repeat, brainwashing tactics. So that is a very insightful comment, though. I'm glad that you asked that question. Okay, the next question comes to us from Classic Chevy Cat, who has something to say about the serial killer Leonard Paradiso, Boston's unknown serial killer, also known as the Quahog. He operated in the 1970s and early 80s, allegedly. He has been the subject of a weekend segment that has been coming out on Black Box Online Radio. He was only ever convicted of one murder, the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi. Classic Chevy Cat Black asks, I meant to ask this under the Marie Iannuzzi show. The man who wrote the book about Leonard Paradiso called him Boston's unknown serial killer, correct? Yes, that's true. And his name is Tim Burke. He is the former assistant district attorney, and he was the prosecutor in the Paradiso trial. First of all, Paradiso wasn't convicted of Joan Webster's murder, which would have been 2 victims. It's my understanding that there has to be at least 2 victims in order to be considered a serial killer. My question is, are we missing something? Were there more possible victims of Leonard Paradiso? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. Originally, I had stated that there were 6 victims, and that is because there's this one book review of the Paradiso files, which refers to it as Leonard Paradiso murdered at least half a dozen women, so that said, and you put something into your memory and it stays there forever, and that's incorrect. It's actually 7 victims have been attributed to the serial killer Leonard Paradiso. I responded to Classic Chevy Cat by saying, hey, you are correct about the definition of a serial killer. Tim Burke, author of the Paradiso Files, accuses Leonard Paradiso of at least 7 murders. The 1974 deaths of Lois Centofonte, Kim Benoit, and Kathy Williams. The 1975 deaths of Holly Davidson and Melody Stakevich. Somebody helped me with the pronunciation of her name. I first referred to her as Melody Stankiewicz, but someone of Polish descent told me it's pronounced Stakevich. That occurred in 75, then the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi and the 1981 murder of Joan Webster. We began the show by talking about Gareth Penn. Gareth Penn was someone who thought that the murder of Joan Webster in 1981 was connected to the Zodiac killer. I mean, you heard very clearly here that the former assistant district attorney adamantly refutes that claim. He believes that Joan Webster was murdered by the serial killer Leonard Paradiso. Eve Carson, whom I've been working with on the weekend segments, she is the author of the book Mommy's a Mole, Whale of a Tale, absolutely disagrees with both of them, Gareth Penn and Tim Burke, and she believes that there was some type of police cover-up that was involved with the murder of Joan Webster, even to the point where she accuses Joan Webster's father, George Webster, of setting up his own daughter for murder because Joan had information on some type of dark family secret where someone would have committed a felony and that they wanted to silence her, so they had their own daughter murdered. I mean, talk about a dark and heart-breaking story, if that is indeed true. Leonard Paradiso, much as classic Chevy Cat said, was not convicted for the murder of Joan Webster, but the ADA, Tim Burke, told me in his own words that there is no doubt in his mind that Leonard Paradiso murdered Joan Webster and Marie Iannuzzi, whom he was convicted for. But the last part of classic Chevy Cat's comment is, also, David Doyle seems like the best suspect in Marie's murder. Love the show, Ned. Always gets me pondering about things when I should be sleeping. Yeah, who doesn't stay up till 3 or 4 a.m. watching YouTube or listening to shows like this one, rather? I definitely do. I mean, I don't know what it is. I just can't do that sort of 9 to 5 life. I'm always awake way too late at night when I should be in bed sleeping as well. About Marie Iannuzzi. She was murdered on August 12th, 1979. On August 11th, she attended a wedding with her boyfriend David Doyle. The wedding was actually for David Doyle's cousin, and Leonard Paradiso, the serial killer, was also there. But he wasn't a good friend of Marie Iannuzzi or anything. If Eve Carson's theory is correct, then that was their first meeting. They were casually introduced. Hey, nice to meet you, I'm Marie. Hey, nice to meet you, I'm Lenny. Lenny does not sound like a very dangerous name, but then, of course, of mice and men. So, there's the wedding, then there's the reception, then there is a house party, then there is a trip to the bar. The long story short is, the girlfriend of Leonard Paradiso named Candy Wyant was supposed to drive Marie Iannuzzi home after the house party. She was being very loud at the house party. Some people said, hey, you gotta take her home. So she drove her, not to the house, but to a bar, which was 2 blocks away from Marie's residence, where she lived in Revere, Massachusetts. From that point, Candy Wyant drove back to the house party to get her boyfriend, Leonard Paradiso, but then it turned out there were some of Marie's belongings that were still in Candy's car. So they drove back to the bar, and this is where Leonard Paradiso is seen by witnesses holding the door open for Marie Iannuzzi to walk out, as we are to presume to collect her stuff from Candy Wyant's car. And Eve Carson says that 4 eyewitnesses placed Marie Iannuzzi back in the bar after Leonard Paradiso had left. And in Eve Carson's timeline, Leonard Paradiso would have gone to his home with Candy Wyant. She drops him off, and then she drives back to her home. They didn't stay in the same place that night, and Leonard Paradiso wouldn't even have had a car. Sometime in between 1:45 a.m. and 7 a.m., Marie Iannuzzi is murdered, and then she's driven to a dump site near Lynn, Massachusetts. It's a marshy area near the Pines River. The Pines River is a tributary of the Saugus River, and her body is dumped in a marshy area. She was strangled with her own scarf, which had been tied into a double knot. And who did it? Leonard Paradiso was convicted of it. But David Doyle was her boyfriend at the time. He had left the wedding because he had ripped his pants, of all things, and he had a very hot temper, and he had gotten into an argument with Marie Iannuzzi. But after he had left the wedding, maybe Marie Iannuzzi went home at 1:45, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. If they did get into an argument, at the wake, David Doyle was seen with scratches on his face. He also had scratches on his hands, and he was trying to sit on his hands to hide them from people. His excuse was that the cat did it, but their cat had run away a month before the murder, so there was no cat at the time. Then David Doyle skips town, goes to Newark, New Jersey, where he's arrested for stealing things from an airport, including an airline ticket. So he has scratches on his hands and face and body, and he is trying to flee the state. Is that suspicious or not? And that's the stuff that we explore on the weekend segment. And there will be an episode this week talking about the serial killer Leonard Paradiso, and maybe he is indeed guilty of certain crimes, but the murders of Marie Iannuzzi and Joan Webster, maybe not. I'll let you guys be the judge, and There are some very strong stances that have been taken by Eve Carson and Tim Burke in that one, as well as, of course, Gareth Penn and his theory. Okay, so thank you to everybody who has listened to this segment here. I really appreciate all of you guys, and feel free to visit the Teespring page as well, since I do not accept donations or cryptocurrency mega millions that you guys want to throw at me. Just think about buying a t-shirt or something like that, but most importantly, I hope you just had a good time listening to this episode. Please feel free to say anything you want in the comments section, and maybe it'll come out on a future AMA or Zodiac Mondays Anything Goes segment. You can follow the show on Facebook at Black Box Online Radio. There's also my personal Facebook, which is in the description box here. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio at AOL.com. You can also send things in to the DMs on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, and that is where I will see you for the bonus podcast. Until next time.